Thank you for joining us today on today's HSO Lunch and Learn session. I'm going to hand you over shortly to my colleagues Tusif and Luca, who are going to take you through the retail industry update. As we know, Microsoft are continuing significant investments and these will impact the way that we are moving forward, how the application is deployed. And the objective of today is just to run through some of the updates which are coming over the course of the next 12 months or so. Precise dates will be with Tusif shortly. We will be running a Q&A session at the end, so please could I ask you to hold on to your questions then. So without further ado, I shall now hand over to my colleague Tusif. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Steve mentioned, my name is Tusif Zafar. I am Head of Technical Services in HSO. I look after a team of technical people doing everything around Dynamics, Azure, integration, etc. And on the call today, I have with me Luca Gans, who is one of our technical architect specializing in commerce. Okay, so for the next 10-15 minutes or so, I will be just talking you through a couple of things. One is to kind of remind ourselves on the retail architecture, then touch on some of the upcoming changes related to retail or commerce specific, their timeline, and what is the benefit in taking those changes, etc., and the process that we need to go through to take the advantage of those changes, and then obviously hoping to spare some 10 minutes or so at the end of it for Q&A. Right. I'm sure if you have done a retail project, you must have seen this diagram before. It's quite complicated, but I'm just going to try and simplify it and focus on the two main points that are in context of this specific discussion. From the architecture point of view, there are two major components: backend and the front end. And if you see the both elements, they both have a different update cadence. So, for example, the backend is what we call Retail HQ or Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, etc. There are 8 releases a year from Microsoft. You have to take at least 2 of them to remain supported by Microsoft. Whereas on the front end side, you have to take at least 1 a year or 1 in the 12 months period to stay supported by Microsoft. And of course, there are bits and pieces that go with this, the how far you can be from different versions of the 2 of those components. Today's discussions is very much focused on this part here, which the front end side. On the backend side of things, I think most of you on the call, I recognize that you have what we call a foundation services agreement with HSO, or a service they have taken that service, which really look after all your the cadence from that point of view. So now focusing on the front end side, there are 2 major changes that are going to hit us over the next 12 months or so. And I'm just going to talk you through one by one. The biggest one and the most important one is what we call a new retail SDK change, which is going to be replaced by the independent packaging solution. So you might have experienced this as well. What happened today if you need to take need to make some customization to the standard POS, or you need to take a new version of the ISV solution, or even need to take the new version of Microsoft code, you need to go through this process of what's called, the repackaging or rebuilding. So in other words, you basically take everything, you put it back in a mix, you relink everything together, and you recompile the code, and you create a new package, which then needs to go through a deployment process. As it sounds, it's very time consuming, and it also not very stable, because the mistakes can happen because it's such a large and complex piece of code. Going forward, Microsoft is moving towards what's called an independent packaging. What happens in that, in a very simple words, is that the core application will be sealed in a 1 installer, and everything else that you add to it, whether it's your custom code, whether it's the ISV solutions, then become a 2nd installer or a 3rd installer. Which basically then enables you to be able to take the upgrade of any of these components independently. This is the major difference. Today, if any of those components get changed, the whole thing needs to be repackaged and redeployed, which is obviously makes it very time consuming and so on. And you've got to test the whole end-to-end application as well. Whereas if you're just taking a one small modification or that should be the only thing you will be testing in this second scenario. Obviously, this will improve the deployment time and the cost. It will also increase the the stability of the system as well, and overall, it's a far better experience. As you can, as we know from the retail point of view, the timeline, usually the duration to take any updates for the POS side is usually very short because of the different the cycles, whether it's Christmas or the summer sales and this and that. So it makes it very challenging to take that type of upgrades. This then helps by minimizing the change and therefore the time that is required for the deployment. Okay, so what do we need to do to get you onto that? Very straightforward. We've got to basically look at all your customizations and ISV solutions that you currently have in place. There is a potential that some of the code needs to be refactored and or adjusted according to the new Seal installer, and then make sure that it still works, and then basically create one final time a full new package, which then get deployed, etc. And then going forward, it will then fall into the category that I explained above, where these things can be updated and upgraded independently. Now the timeline. The current SDK will continue to be supported by Microsoft until the April 23. Now, like any other application, the support doesn't mean that you can't use it after that date. That means this is the date when no more fixes after that will be provided by Microsoft. You can continue to deploy and get fixes until that date. After that, if you have, as per any other as per the basic rule that the POS can be 12 months outdated, or you need to take only one release a year, that can be, you can continue to use whatever version you have last into the production, whether it's April 23 or before, will remain there for the next 12 months. So you basically can get an extra 12 months on top of that. Our recommendation would be to try and get onto this ASAP. And I know it's quite challenging, depending on for different types of retailers, the different timelines and different challenges that you face. It is quite a big ask, but it will be useful if we can try and get onto this as soon as possible, because this is the way forward. This is what is going to, the new deployments will look like, and therefore it makes sense to get on it to minimize all the problems and increase your frequency to take more updates from Microsoft and more frequently. Which obviously, as you know, those updates do contain performance fixes and bug fixes, etc. So that's help with overall health of the system. Now, the second change that I really want to touch on is the MPOS deprecation. So Microsoft is looking to deprecate MPOS. And again, very similar reasons, as you can imagine. Today we have two different versions of the front end, which, as you know, the MPOS and the CPOS. What this does is MPOS will be replaced by what's new thing with this new experience called Store Commerce App, which is basically a unified version of the both, and then it's the performance of the POS has significantly improved in that. The upgrades, the extension, etc., is much more simplified as well. Another really important thing to highlight is that doesn't mean that you need to redevelop the code that you have done. In fact, very minimum, if any changes would be required, it should be you should be able to transfer that extensions or customizations to the newer version of or the Store Commerce App without much pain. And again, the benefit, as I touched on, this is much slicker and the performant version for it. All those things that you had before, like the offline deployments and all those things, like the dedicated hardware station, etc., will still be supported. There is no change there at all. As I said, in terms of the migration steps, it's very similar. We got to do a review and understand what you have, what type of changes been done, and if you have an ISV solution, for example, for your POS, what does that mean? And make sure they have a version that is also compatible with the version that you are going to take as well, for the Store Commerce App, etc. Make sure everything is good, and then you just do a one final deployment of that. In terms of the timeline, got a little bit more time there. It's supported by Microsoft until October next year. You can continue to deploy and fix it by that date, very similar to any of Microsoft product. As you know, support date is the date that Microsoft will continue to push more fixes and the features, and after that date, you don't get any new functionality or feature or even fixes. You can continue to use in prod for another 12 months, like as you know, is in terms of the any other PAWS update, it can be backward compatible for 12 months. And the last thing to highlight is that we recommend do a couple of things. We recommend, one is that we don't wait for the October 23 date. We try and plan this and put this in place well before that. This will allow us to make sure that if there are any hiccups or any issues, or giving you more time for the deployment and rollout, because I know some of our customers have a very large number of PAWS systems that they need to update, which is quite a task in itself. And the other thing we recommend is perhaps looking at taking both of those changes together, because otherwise you could end up go through the 2 rounds of upgrade, which is obviously not time consuming and expensive and everything. So that's really it. So these are 2 major changes coming. Just a quick recap of both is that one is to do with the retail SDK. Now, both of these change, and the second one is obviously on the mPOS deprecation or the replacement with the Store Commerce app. If you haven't seen the new Store Commerce app experience, there are some links in this presentation we will share with you where you can look at Microsoft Tech Talk, which explains what it is, and actually in the both topics and go in a lot more detail. Now, even though the both changes are technical in nature, but it improves the overall experience in terms of the deployment, the packaging and the deployment of the PAWS changes, and also the performance and some other things as well. So that's really it. Now, in terms of the call of action, right? What we want you to do next. So, I mean, everyone on the call here is an HSO customer, so you already have a relationship with HSO. I would strongly recommend that you please reach out to your account manager and book this assessment with us. There is no cost for that assessment. And really what it is, it's basically for us to, I mean, we understand your systems already anyway, but it's to sit down with you and come up with a bespoke plan to understand your peak trading timings, the different stores, because we have customers who have only handful of tills or PAWS systems compared to some of the customers who go in hundreds. So the plan will look very different for both of for 2 of them. So therefore, what we want to do is to sit down with you and create a bespoke plan, and for you, what does that mean? Which include which will be a number of things. So we go perform a overall solution review. We'll plan the refactoring, any customizations that we have done for you, and say, look, this customization needs refactoring, or you might even want to take the alternative that is now available because the standard solution has moved on since you went live with those modifications, and you might want to adopt something new from that as well, and so on. And then in reality, you go through this planning, and the end game would be to create a new package and then come up with a plan to roll out that package. We explicitly kept it very, very high level and given more time for Q&A. Hope you find this useful and get an idea of these changes. I think some of the name I recognize on the call that we have already flagged this in various conversations, that these changes are coming. I would highlight one thing, that the second change to do with mPOS deprecation, the timeline of that is we are hearing mixed messages from Microsoft, whether it's actually the deprecation is it a soft deprecation or is actually a hard deprecation, and what if it happens, what date it will be, etc. So there is some flexibility, I would say, on the mPOS deprecation side of things, but I think it probably would be fair to say that we should plan it anyway, because this is going to happen. Store Commerce is the way forward. The Store Commerce app is the way forward. That's what the new experience is. So therefore, we've got to plan it. Now, you might get an extra 6 months, and so on, but it will be useful to start putting that in plan.